Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature video number 205, Occultism and Modern Science. It's about parapsychology and other things. Link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon, second and third links to my books, blogs. Very good work overall, full length, and primarily is talking about a few examples of individuals claiming various phenomena, mediumship, and so forth. It has two sections that are of great note, but just in brief, it's talking about like people who summon spirits, people who contact the dead, automatic writing, second sight, things of that nature, looking at them within a semi-scientific sort of framework. Now, it's not a rationalist text. The author here and the people being noted are all spiritualists for the most part. However, it's from a slightly more rationalistic perspective. It's more experimental than typical like spiritualism work. So there is that for it. Two individuals specifically here that are spoken of at length. They've both got their own sections. Very interesting material. Highly recommended. Eva Carriere, number one, a famous medium. I'll get into her in a sec. Her colorful history. And then Rudolf Steiner of Theosophy and Anthroposophy fame. First to Eva Carriere. If you don't know anything about her, she was one of the preeminent mediums of her era. And she would do her shows stark naked. She would submit to gynecological exams in front of a live audience predominantly comprised of men. We'll get into that. She used to materialize these paper cutouts that were very creepy, definitely, and call them like ectoplasm. She would be able to put them through a veil and so forth. Now, at the time that this was written, no one had debunked Eva Carriere. This is important. Houdini looked into it. He hadn't debunked it. Doyle looked into it. Sherlock Holmes author looked into it. You know, two of the best mythbusters of their day were incapable of debunking what she was doing. They're like, well, we're skeptical. There's some weird shit going on here, but we can't debunk it. What happened is it turns out later on her Arabic, literally, from, I guess this was part of her show, helper there said, yeah, you know, I used to materialize through a trap door, and these were paper cutouts. She was, you know, storing them in her throat, basically, and could cough them up at a moment's notice. She had all these various tricks. It was parlor magic. She was a lesbian. And the person that was giving her the exams that everyone thought was just sort of her consort, her friend, was actually her lover. And so she was getting off on this the whole time. She was deliberately sexualizing her audience. Look, back then, being naked up on stage, being naked and especially getting basically fingered at the time, that's very risque for the era. Very, very taboo. Her audience is mostly male. They're, you know, undersexed, Victorians. They're getting off. They're not paying attention to anything but her tits at the time. So it was possible for her to get people to materialize and dematerialize with trapdoors. Nobody noticed. To manipulate veils in such a way as to hide body parts, or someone could suddenly come storming out and people didn't know where they came from. There is one passage there about her putting her ectoplasm, so-called, through an actual screen without leaving behind residue. That's a little bit odd, and as far as I know, hasn't been debunked. At least it's some sort of magic trick, obviously, but hasn't been really solved. So that's a little mysterious. But yeah, I mean, she was a far-out character. They don't even know, I think, when she died. She just sort of disappears into the annals of history after several decades of basically getting off on stage in front of, you know, Victorian upper-class men. So that's funny. And then Rudolf Steiner, very influential individual within Theosophy, leaves, sort of splits off the Blavatsky path and forms Anthroposophy, which is vaguely different. Author of many, many works. I mean, his entire collection would fill up an entire bookshelf. With Rudolf Steiner, the author says basically, well, he hasn't proven his concepts, and he's always making these grand statements about how you need Steiner's help specifically for X, Y, and Z. He talks about second sight, but he should use other terminology. He's grandiose. He says a bunch of nothing. But then he actually applauds Steiner and says, but as far as his treatments of others' philosophy, his write-ups and analysis, it's like grade A stuff. You should definitely check it out. And then apparently, this is from the second edition. This is also important. In between the first and second edition, Steiner actually issued a rebuttal and was very, very angry at this and targeted directly the author. So in the second edition, he's like, well, Steiner is like really mad at me and stuff. I'm not going to say that he's a madman or anything like that. I just want him to submit to this experimentation and prove his thing. And the thing is, Again, these are spiritualists. So they're in league with these sort of occult movements. It's not like it's an unreceptive author. It's just pointing out the grandiosity in some of these things. So it's kind of an amusing work if you know anything about the people spoken of as well. Again, link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books, blogs. This goes in the academic section, although it's technically a spiritualist work. That's about all. Peace out.